We're in the studio in '85, and I just got the idea of having Jerry Marotta, the drummer, play drum on the bass strings. A year later, the record came out. It's a synth bass, not me. It's Peter. Peter played it. Cool sound.
In a music world where artists often have to scream, provoke, or stir up drama to be heard, Tony Levin steps onto the stage as a living paradox. He doesn't have wild hair, doesn't leap through smoke-filled lights, no romantic scandals or shocking sound bites. He simply stands there, with a bass guitar, a set of worn strings, and hands patiently tapping out rhythms as if striking the silent heartbeat of the entire music industry. His name rarely makes the front pages, but if you've ever heard Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer, Paul Simon's 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, or found yourself lost in the complex harmonies of King Crimson, then you've heard Tony Levin, not through his voice, but through a deep, nuanced sound that only the most humble of great artists can create. Over more than 6 decades, Levin has played on more than 500 albums, not as a hired gun, but as a quiet soul helping to shape the sonic identity of a generation. He is the musician that legends like John Lennon, David Bowie, Pink Floyd, and Peter Gabriel wanted in the studio, not because he demanded attention, but because he listened. Not because he stole the spotlight, but because he knew how to help others shine when it mattered most. So what makes someone almost invisible to the public, no image branding, no controversies, no explosive headlines, become one of the most respected bassists in the world? And how is it that nearing 80, he's still touring, still playing the Chapman Stick like a Zen master of rock? The story of Tony Levin doesn't begin with bravado. It begins in silence and grows into a symphony that needs no spotlight to be heard forever. Early life. Tony Levin was born on June 6, 1946, in Boston, Massachusetts, a city steeped in academic and artistic tradition. Yet his family belonged to the typical middle class, with no one pursuing music professionally. There was no childhood tragedy, no abandonment or poverty, but it was precisely that sense of normalcy that became a rare foundation, allowing him to devote himself wholly to music, free from ego or emotional scarcity. Tony began studying music at the age of 10, with an unusual choice: the upright bass. At a time when most kids dreamed of being Elvis or Sinatra, Tony was hauling an instrument almost as tall as himself onto buses through Boston winters. But that bulk and difficulty taught him his first real lesson. If you want to create deep, lasting sound, you must learn how to support it quietly from the ground up. In addition to upright bass, Tony also studied tuba, another large, unglamorous instrument, and played in school orchestras. Instead of seeking the spotlight, he became comfortable in the role of foundation, where music values stability over flash. It was during this time that Levin's lifelong philosophy was born: be the one who holds the rhythm so others can soar. His serious passion for music led Tony to the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York, one of the most prestigious conservatories in the United States. There, he received rigorous classical training and had the opportunity to play with the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra, even performing under the baton of Igor Stravinsky, the towering figure of modern symphonic music. That experience wasn't just academic. It instilled in Tony a near-sacred reverence for sound, not just something to be heard, but to be felt, to be still with, to understand. At Eastman, Tony met Steve Gadd, a young drummer then beginning to shape a new style. The two quickly became musical collaborators and close friends, exploring genres beyond the academic curriculum: jazz, funk, fusion. Their spontaneous dorm room jam sessions opened a new horizon for Tony. Music wasn't just a score, it was improvisation. It was the pulse of the present moment. Though trained to be a classical musician, Tony felt he didn't belong in the rule-bound world of orchestras. He longed for something more open, where precision didn't kill emotion. And so, after graduating, he chose to abandon the safe path. He left Rochester for New York City, carrying with him a bass, some savings, and an extraordinary conviction. Fame wasn't necessary, as long as the groove was right. For Tony Levin, everything began not with stage lights, but with an oversized instrument, a symphony concert, and a soul that had never stopped listening to the world around it. Early career. When Tony Levin arrived in New York in the early 1970s, he carried no fame, no big connections, and no desire to become a rock star. But he brought with him something far more valuable: the ability to listen, flawless technique, and an extraordinary calmness, the kind that allows others to shine while he holds the rhythm beneath them. At the time, New York was the recording capital of the world, where artists from every genre flocked: folk, pop, jazz, and cutting-edge rock. Levin didn't take long to get noticed in the tight-knit community of session musicians, the hired hands behind countless studio recordings. And even though he was still unknown, those sitting behind the glass of the control room quickly realized one thing: Tony Levin didn't make mistakes, ever. One of his major breakthroughs came in 1975 when he was called to record with Paul Simon, a towering figure in American music. It was Levin who played bass on the iconic hit 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, his smooth, rhythmic tone becoming the spine of the track. Not flashy, but absolutely essential. From that moment, his name began to circulate among producers. Call Tony. He doesn't need instructions. He knows what the song needs before you do. His studio career exploded. In less than a decade, Levin had recorded bass for a dazzling array of top artists: John Lennon, Lou Reed, Judy Collins, Dire Straits, Alice Cooper, Carly Simon, and many more. Each session was a different musical world, and Levin blended into everyone as if he'd been born for it. He could play an improvised jazz tune in the morning, a tender folk ballad at noon, and a roaring rock anthem by night, with the same precision and the same ego-free devotion to the song. But what made Levin truly special wasn't the long list of names he'd worked with. It was how he disappeared into each track, never demanding the spotlight, never stepping on the vocalist, not a single unnecessary note, no ego, no need to show off like so many bass players of the era. He once said, "I don't play to be noticed. I play to keep the song alive." Then came another fateful studio session. Peter Gabriel, freshly departed from Genesis and searching for a new creative path. Levin didn't just play bass on Gabriel's first solo album. He became his trusted collaborator, the man Gabriel would later call the silent creative partner, for over 4 decades to come. From a classical music student to an anonymous hand behind hundreds of recordings, Tony Levin quietly laid the foundation for one of the most steady and respected careers in rock, and he did it without raising his voice. He just played in perfect time. Career breakthrough. If the 1970s marked Tony Levin's quiet ascent through the world of studio recording, then the 1980s were when he finally stepped out of the shadows, not with a dramatic explosion, but through an irreplaceable series of contributions to 2 of the most forward-thinking artists of the era, Peter Gabriel and Robert Fripp. In 1977, Peter Gabriel had just left Genesis and embarked on a risky new journey, making music that didn't cater to the mainstream. He needed a team not only of skilled musicians, but of visionaries, people unafraid to tear up the rulebook. He found Tony Levin, a man who never said much but always knew exactly when to play a note and when to stay silent. Right from Gabriel's first solo album, untitled, commonly known as Car, Levin established himself as the backbone of Gabriel's sound, powerful, fluid, and endlessly inventive. But it wasn't until 1986's so that the world truly heard Tony Levin, even if they didn't know his name. The song Sledgehammer, with its pounding, pulse-pushing bass line, was Levin's creation, using a unique technique called funk fingers, drumsticks attached to his fingers, mimicking a percussive attack on the bass. This wasn't just a gimmick. It was the result of a creative accident. Gabriel had once asked him to play like a drummer, and Levin, together with engineer Larry Fast, devised a way to physically strike the bass strings. Funk fingers became Levin's signature, and Sledgehammer became Peter Gabriel's biggest hit, topping the Billboard charts and turning Gabriel into an MTV icon. While fans remembered the surreal animation of the video, few knew the man who crafted its sonic backbone, standing at the rear of the stage, tapping strings with both technique and instinct. Levin would go on to collaborate with Gabriel for over 4 decades. From Shock the Monkey to Steam, from massive stadium tours to orchestral concerts, he remained the rhythmic anchor to Gabriel's ever-shifting musical states, from ethereal to explosive, electronic to folk-infused. If Peter Gabriel was the visionary thinker of pop introspection, then Robert Fripp, the mastermind behind King Crimson, was the metaphysical architect of progressive rock, extreme, eccentric, and ruthlessly precise. When Fripp reformed King Crimson in 1981 with an entirely new lineup, he knew he needed a bassist not just with skill, but with the psychological stamina to endure his creative intensity. Tony Levin joined the Discipline-era lineup, marking Crimson's shift from symphonic rock to math rock, new wave, and some of the most complex musical structures ever attempted. Levin didn't just play bass, he introduced an entirely new instrument, the Chapman Stick, a 10-stringed touchboard played with two-handed tapping that allowed him to perform bass lines, chords, and melodies simultaneously. With the Chapman Stick, Levin wasn't just holding down the bottom end, he became a self-contained melodic engine. Tracks like Elephant Talk, Frame by Frame, and Indiscipline all bear his unmistakable signature, bold, intricate, and yet always human. Fripp once said of Levin, "Tony doesn't just play music, he creates the space in which music arises." Through more than 40 years of on and off Crimson activity, Levin remained one of its few constant members, alongside Fripp and drummer Pat Mastelotto. Even when the band was suddenly dissolved, Fripp had a habit of disbanding it after every album, Levin always returned when called. To him, King Crimson wasn't a band, it was an eternal sonic experiment. Beyond his 2 most famous collaborations, Tony Levin became one of the most sought-after players across genres: jazz fusion, world music, film scores, even progressive metal. He joined Liquid Tension Experiment alongside members of Dream Theater, formed Stickmen to showcase the Chapman Stick, and released numerous experimental solo albums. But no matter where he played, one trait remained constant. He never demanded the spotlight, yet his presence held the music together. From Sledgehammer to Elephant Talk, from the classic upright bass to the cosmic Chapman Stick, Tony Levin became an instrument of the music itself. No boundaries, no ego, no need for fame. He just wanted to play, to hold the rhythm steady, so the brilliant minds around him could keep going mad. Style and musical philosophy. In a world where bassists often strive to break free from the shadow of the lead guitar, where slap techniques, two-handed tapping, and blistering speed are praised as hallmarks of success, Tony Levin chose to step back. Not because he couldn't stand out, but because he believed that the true role of the musician is to serve the song. He once said, "I don't play to be noticed. I play to keep the music alive the way it needs to live." That statement isn't just a professional stance, it's a life philosophy. Tony Levin doesn't see himself as a star, but as an element in the architecture of sound, sometimes nearly invisible, but if removed, the entire structure could collapse. Because of that, his bass playing style never tries to overpower melodies, never drowns out the vocalist, and never uses technique to impress. Instead, it listens, adapts, and only speaks when the music truly calls for it. Levin's quiet creativity is what has made him a giant among serious musicians. He's widely credited with popularizing the Chapman Stick, a stringed instrument with 8 to 12 strings, allowing players to simultaneously handle bass lines, chords, and melodies using a two-handed tapping technique. With the stick, Levin expanded the expressive possibilities of bass, not just providing foundation, but painting sonic landscapes from a role often relegated to the background. He also invented the funk fingers, drumstick tips attached to his fingers, enabling him to strike the bass like a percussion instrument. The idea may have sounded odd at first, but when applied to tracks like Big Time and Steam by Peter Gabriel, it completely redefined the listener's perception of bass in pop and rock, transforming it into a pulse, a breath, a rhythmic punch to the chest. For those who've worked with him, Tony Levin is a man of detail, an artist who never overlooks the difference between the right note and the appropriate note. In the studio, he would often ask engineers, "Can we replay that section? I think I played it correctly, but not the way the song wanted." It's no surprise that professionals often refer to him as the bassist's bassist. Some artists thrill audiences but intimidate collaborators. Levin is the opposite. Every band wants him, every producer trusts him with the arrangement, and every soloist knows he'll play exactly what's needed, no more, no less. To Tony Levin, music is not a technical monologue. It's a conversation. And to make that conversation truly meaningful, sometimes you have to learn to say less and play at the right moment. Personal life. Tony Levin is a rare testament in the world of rock. Over 6 decades of musical activity, without scandal, without controversy, without messy divorces, and perhaps most notably, with virtually no personal life ever leaking beyond the bounds of his music. In an era where artists often flood social media with daily glimpses into their lives to keep public interest alive, Tony Levin chose a different route: complete silence. No personal Instagram, no carefully curated behind-the-scenes videos, no provocative comments about his spouse or children. Matters of love, family, and faith, he keeps them all sealed in a quiet sanctuary where music is the final frontier the public is allowed to cross. He married early and has lived a stable life with his wife in Kingston, New York, far from the noise of the entertainment industry. Though he has toured the world with Peter Gabriel, King Crimson, Stickmen, and Liquid Tension Experiment, Levin has always maintained an undisturbed inner rhythm. There were no media missteps, no brushes with fame's darker side, because he never stepped into that arena in the first place. Rather than showcase his life, he documents it through a camera lens. Since the early 1990s, Levin has maintained a habit of photographing life on tour and sharing it on his personal blog at tonylevin.com. These aren't staged artistic shots, nor selfies with fans, but raw, honest glimpses, a simple pre-show meal, a bandmate tuning strings backstage, or a quiet hotel corner where he practices Chapman Stick at midnight. To him, photography isn't about branding. It's about preserving the living memory that music alone can't fully express. In the music world, Tony Levin is known not only for his serious work ethic, but for his impeccable character. Colleagues describe him with words rarely heard in such a competitive industry. Kind, punctual, and always listening. Someone who never speaks ill of anyone and never becomes a burden to the crew. Working with Tony is like standing near a landmark, quiet, solid, irreplaceable. No need to draw attention. No urge to seize every opportunity to talk about himself. Tony Levin chooses to step back, not out of shyness, but because he understands this truth. The foundation must stand in a place no one sees, so that the music, not the ego, can shine. Legacy and influence. Tony Levin has never stood center stage. He has no signature hit to his name, never sang lead vocals, and never topped the charts. And yet, strangely, powerfully, he has been the rhythmic backbone of an entire generation of music, spanning rock, pop, progressive, jazz, and world genres. Over more than 50 years, Tony Levin has played on more than 500 albums, a number that only a handful of bassists in history can rival. But that figure alone can't capture the quiet magic he brings. What makes it remarkable is this: every track with Levin on bass simply sounds right. Never showy, never gimmicky, but always fitting, as if he isn't playing, but listening alongside the listener. From Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer to Paul Simon's 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, From the complex progressive suites of King Crimson to the introspective moments on solo projects, Tony Levin is present like an invisible foundation. No one talks about it, but without it, everything collapses. Levin's influence doesn't stem from fame or awards, but from the absolute trust he inspires among artists. Peter Gabriel calls him "my left hand in the studio." Robert Fripp refers to him as a companion in sonic experimentation. And hundreds of musicians who've worked with him agree on one thing: if you could choose only one person to play bass on the final project of your life, it would be Tony Levin. To younger bassists, Levin represents a school of thought. Not one of speed or flash, but of feel, of subtlety, of serving the song. He has inspired a generation to understand that greatness isn't always found in the spotlight. It can lie in the steady, quiet act of lifting others up. His legacy isn't just in the recordings. It's in the way he's existed within the music industry without ever being consumed by it. He never changed himself to chase trends. He never bowed to public taste. He never spoke ill of anyone. He is a man who kept his personal rhythm steady amid the chaotic beat of fame. And now, approaching 80, while many of his peers have retired, Tony Levin still stands on stage, still taps the Chapman Stick as if he just discovered it yesterday, engaged, present, and composed. He doesn't need to prove anything because the music has already proven everything for him. Present life. In 2025, Tony Levin will turn 79. But if you're picturing a retired old man living quietly in a cabin somewhere in the suburbs, think again. Levin isn't aging that way. He's still touring, still practicing every day, still standing on stage, lean frame, familiar bald head, and hands that haven't left the strings in over 60 years. Today, he's a core member of Stickmen, a progressive instrumental project he co-founded with drummer Pat Mastelotto, King Crimson, and Chapman Stick virtuoso Marcus Reuter. Though far from mainstream, Stickmen has built a loyal fan base thanks to its bold experimentation and powerful live performances, where Levin doesn't just play bass, but channels the full force of the Chapman Stick, like a nervous system wiring every pulse across the stage. Beyond Stickmen, Levin also performs with Beat, a supergroup reviving the 1980s King Crimson era, featuring an unbelievable lineup including Adrian Belew, Steve Vai, and Danny Carey of Tool. But this isn't mere nostalgia. It's a continuation of relentless creative spirit as veteran musicians bring complex compositions into the modern world, with Levin at the core, quiet, precise, unflinching. When not touring, Tony Levin still lives in Kingston, New York, with the wife he never puts on social media. Each morning he practices, jots down new ideas, and maintains his personal blog, where he shares backstage photos, day-to-day life, and short but profound reflections. No fanfare, no need for attention, yet he's built a small, devoted community that admires him not for his fame, but for his integrity and musical depth. In an age where artists compete for views, chase digital trends, and polish their personas for online platforms, Tony Levin remains a study in resistance. He doesn't chase relevance. He doesn't live stream. He doesn't make flashy comebacks. He just keeps playing, as if he never stopped. When asked once why he hasn't retired at nearly 80, he gave a quiet smile and said, "I still hear music in my head every morning. As long as I hear it, I'll keep playing." And maybe, when his final bass note rings out on some small stage in Europe or North America, it will still carry that rare quality. No need to shout, no need to stand out. Yet it will make the entire room fall silent, just to listen. Tony Levin will always be a symbol. Not because he stood under the brightest lights, but because he quietly held up the entire stage. An artist who spent a lifetime listening, holding time, and building the sturdiest musical foundations without ever demanding to be remembered by name. His legacy doesn't live in fanfare. It lives in the absolute respect of his peers and in the quiet bass lines that have echoed across the world for more than half a century. What do you think of Tony Levin's remarkable, deeply human journey? Which song featuring his bass work left the biggest impression on you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about music's unsung legends. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Goodbye.